You are listening to the Knotted Physio podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Resmondo, owner of South Alabama Physiotherapy and creator of the Knotted Physio, where life should be fun and light. This is the podcast where we talk about how to keep the active adult who's busy with work and family life fit and healthy to enjoy the Gulf Coast outdoors. Let's get into today's episode. Before we start today, I wanted to let you know about our free Facebook group, The Knotted Physio. I do live trainings in the group each week to dive deeper into strategies to remain active and where you can ask me questions personally and I'll give you feedback. Okay, on to the episode. Hey guys, welcome to the Knotted Physio podcast. I am your host, Jenny Resmondo. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, I've got a special guest. I've got Kelly Kessler. She is a great friend of mine. She owns her own business. It's Optimal You Health and Wellness. And I want to welcome you, Kelly. Take a moment and introduce yourself for us and tell us a little bit about what you do with you and your business.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Kelly. Thanks for having me, Jenny. I'm happy to be here. So I help individuals who have had a history of an eating disorder achieve relief from chronic pain. So I'm motivated and by it because it has been something I struggled with in the past. I had an eating disorder that subsequently led to chronic back pain, and it was a battle for both of those, but I achieved recovery from both of them. And so now I help others who are in that position.
That sounds so complex. Like how did you discover, or how did it transition so that you realized that your eating disorder actually did not help you with the chronic pain? How did that transpire?
Yeah, so it was a roundabout process. I didn't realize at first that they were connected. So when I was going through the eating disorder, the nature of my eating disorder was that I would exercise excessively. So I would eat a lot, then I would exercise excessively, and it kind of led to throwing up too. But the excessive exercise was my main mode of just kind of controlling calories. And so I recovered from the eating disorder, and then I still had back pain. And so I had back pain for several years, went to a practitioner. And this is before I went to PT school, but they got an x-ray and they're like, your L4, L5 disc height is half of what it should be for a 25-year-old. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, what do I do with this? And this is before I knew what to do. And they're like, well, we'll try this. And, it doesn't really improve. The disc height only gets worse. So I left that appointment feeling like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, this is a terrible situation. I'm only 25 years old, And then so 3 years went by. I started PT school, learn, everything we learn in PT school. And I'm like, okay, let me start applying all these things that I learned to myself. And so I went about it from very much like an orthopedic point of view. I had gone through the exercises. I did flexibility. I did strengthening. I did everything that I could think of that like made sense for what I was presenting with, and still achieved no relief that lasted long term. And so that's when I realized like I never really processed the emotions or the stress that I had gone through my eating disorder. And I still was kind of carrying all that, even though I wasn't acting on it like through the eating disorder anymore. And so I started working through that and started incorporating like breath work. I started doing some intuitive movement. I started working on not going so hard on myself and started working through my emotions and learned everything I could about the nervous system, because I started learning how that can become dysregulated because of chronic stress and trauma. And that's when I actually started seeing relief. And I put myself through that whole regimen. I continue to learn. I still do things, and I don't have back pain today. So I lived with it for years, and I don't experience that now. And I've had 2 kids. I do everything I like to do, and it doesn't hold me back anymore.
I want to like re-emphasize that. So what Kelly had just said is that she started dealing with all the stress and trauma that she had for all those years. And once she started working through that, her back pain started getting better. So it's not always, you have a herniated disc, or like you said, your disc height, the space wasn't there that's causing the pain. It's all this underlying stress and trauma that you started to work through, you started to deal with, and you started to regulate your nervous system.
Mhm.
And it was something that seems like it could have been so simple,
Mhm.
but you had to find your way there to be able
Yeah.
to start to work through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was very frustrated myself because I'm like, how can I'm a physical therapist. I can't even help myself. And it really was when I started doing that integrative approach and not just going at it like, oh, this is short, this is weak, let me do this. I really started diving in deep into getting to know my own body and what I needed and getting to really work through some of those emotions. And
Yeah,
it like opening the door. It's like, oh my gosh, that actually feels better. And then
right.
like the minute you have relief, it's you just keep going with it and you're like, okay, let me do this. This is
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love how you just said it, that it was, you were going through all the mechanical components, the
Mhm.
shortness, the weakness, and that is what we learn, the mechanical components in physical therapy school. They don't teach us about the integrative approach, about the breath work, about regulating your nervous system, dealing with the stress that's kind of like the underlying cause that's in there
Mhm.
nagging it every time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that it's a game changer. It really is. And especially when the pain is chronic, it's that compounds anything that's going on beforehand. And so now you're stressed because I mean, for me, I was young. I'm like, I have a whole life ahead of me. I can't be having this pain in my 20s. This is crazy. And so
Yeah.
it just compounded everything. And then literally it was like, it just made sense once I got to it. Didn't make sense in before it and didn't make sense while I was kind of in it, but then I got through and I'm like, that was completely connected because I worked through that and now I'm pain free. It was almost like the burden had been lifted from me.
Yeah. So if you've got somebody, or if there's somebody out there listening to this podcast that's dealing with chronic pain, what are the first couple of steps that they should be doing to be able to start to work through their issues? What
Mhm.
can you suggest to them?
Yeah, I think the big thing is recognizing. So for me, like I understand the nervous system, but there's a lot of things
Sure.
that dysregulate the nervous system. So I started learning about what are the things that are dysregulating my nervous system. So I looked at different things that were bringing on stress, things that were not serving me or were draining my energy, things that I was doing, people around me, situations. I looked at my sleeping patterns, my energy. I looked at what I was eating. I looked at my movement. I looked at every aspect of my life. Like, what can I change? And what were some things that I thought were helping me were actually making things worse. So I really took a deep dive into figuring out, okay, what's helping me, what's kind of neutral, and what's hurting me. And I started making the changes and decreasing the things that were dysregulating me. And that really was the first step that I took. And then I started implementing self care practices on a daily basis that were getting me back into a place of balance again.
Right.
And that really was the catalyst for change. So those were the first two big steps, was figuring out what's causing all this. And again, all the emotions I kind of worked through too. And then I figured out how I can get myself back and start implementing those
Yeah.
things.
So self-care is not selfish.
No, not at all.
Not at all. We were having a conversation before we started recording about, if you can't give yourself the time for self-care, that you have nothing left in your tank to be able to give to others.
Exactly. And that's the big thing too, is like as a mom, it was like, there's always that guilt, like, oh, I should be playing my kid, I shouldn't be doing this. But it really, for me, I recognize that like I'm gonna lead by example. If I'm not taking care of myself, I can't expect my kid to ever do that one day. And then I'm just gonna perpetuate the cycle that my child will put everything before himself. And then just like I did, and that got me in a really bad place. So I don't want him doing that. He has to see from me that I have to prioritize myself before I can show up for everyone else.
Right. Wow. That's so perfectly well said. What do
Oh,
you
thanks.
do for your self-care? Like, I mean, are there things, because you said that you were an excessive exerciser. I mean, exercise is
Mhm.
still a component. So what is it that you're doing now that seems to be kind of helping keep you at a good level?
Yeah. So I had to really reestablish a healthy relationship with exercise. So to be honest, I was excessively doing it. I kind of took many years off of like not like I had to work myself down to not doing nothing, which was a step by step approach. And then
Sure.
I had to reestablish a healthy relationship. So for me, I started out very, very small and just doing I did start with yoga. Yoga helped tremendously. I did start with breath work. I just started just moving in a way that felt good. I didn't worry about reps. I didn't worry about putting the weights, getting the weights higher or running miles. I stopped running completely for that time being. But I started doing just things that I enjoyed and made me feel good. And it was, I call it like intuitive movement, like what just feels good without feeling like the pressure of having to always one up myself. So that was a big component. But my self-care has kind of evolved. That was more in like the beginning phases. Now I still exercise. I have ramped it up because I generally do enjoy lifting. I do enjoy running. I do triathlons. I have done multiple half marathons. So I generally do enjoy that. And now that I'm in a place where I can be healthy and not be excessive, it's been fun to get back into that stuff. But my self-care now just is on a daily basis. What I do is I start with a cold shower in the first thing in the morning. And I don't necessarily recommend this for somebody who's starting out. This is something I've built myself up to, but non-negotiable. I start jump in the cold shower. Actually, before I even get out of bed, I do some kind of meditation or just uh kind of do some mindful practice. So something to kind of bring myself into my body. And then I jump in the cold shower, and then I do gratitude journaling. So I just write down three things I'm thankful for and a positive experience that I had the day prior. And then I kind of jump right into my day. Sometimes I do exercise in the morning, depending on the day. I kind of change that up and around. And then at night, again, I read before bed every night. So something that's personal development. I do breath work before bed. And if I didn't do the gratitude journal in the morning, I do it at night. So I kind of, that kind of flips. But those are my big things that I do for myself on a daily basis.
That's awesome that you have a routine and that you just kind of stuck with it because
Hmm.
if you fall off track, the thing that I've noticed is most people stay off track. They don't jump right back on it. And
Yeah.
to be able to allow ourselves that opportunity to have a little grace,
Hmm.
but still do our self-care every day.
Yeah, it's so important. And a big mind switch for me or mindset shift was I was a perfectionist for years. So if it wasn't perfect, it's not good. And it was never good enough. So for me, it was like, does not have to be perfect. Why do I feel like it has to be perfect? So I had to ask myself, like, why? That doesn't help me. So I don't focus on perfection. I focus on consistency. So if I miss a day, but I get back on, I'm still consistent. So that gives me that kind of kind of like open spot to feel like, oh, I can be human and still show up for myself.
Right. That's amazing. That's
Mhm.
awesome that you said that. Well, to be able to wrap up, Kelly, what would you say is maybe the best advice to be able to help somebody with the chronic pain find the help that they need?
Mhm. Yeah, and I know we had kind of talked about this before, but I think you have to find someone who resonates with you, someone that you feel comfortable with, someone that you trust, someone that maybe you followed their work for a while and it seems like it would be fitting for what your journey is. I think the big thing is just having a person that holds you accountable, someone who guides you, and someone who you feel like you're part of something. And that's the big thing as far as healing, because you don't want to meet resistance in the person that you're seeking help from.
Oh, perfectly.
Yeah.
That is perfectly said. I
Oh,
love
thanks.
that. That was a great summary. Well, Kelly, if my listeners are wanting to find more information about you or to be able to get in touch with you, what's the best way that they could reach you?
Sure. Yeah. So you can go through my website. It's Optimal You. So YOU healthandwellness.com. I am also on all social media under Dr. Kelly Kessler, one word.
Awesome. Kelly, thank you so much for being here today and just sharing this little bit of knowledge about chronic pain and eating disorders and stress and how it
Sure.
all wraps in together and really can affect our bodies.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Awesome. All right, guys. So tune in next time on the Not a Physio podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions at all, you're welcome to write them in the comments below, or you can send an email at jenny@salpt.com. All right. We'll see you guys next time.